Hey, everybody. This is attorney Veronica McClendon, the owner, CEO, and managing attorney of McClendon Law and Consulting. We're coming to you live from Macon, Georgia, and I want to talk to you about something that I've been really surprised to learn that a lot of families who have inherited property, people who own heirs property, are not doing. And I want to make sure y'all are doing it because this is something that is causing a lot of families to lose land unnecessarily. So I'm going to clue y'all into something, but I'm going to start out with a little story. So I talked with some clients the other day, and they were telling me about some land that their father had inherited, and his name was actually on the deed to the land, but his name was on there along with some of his brothers and sisters, and then a few nieces and nephews. So in total, there's a handful of family members that he owned this property with, but he definitely was one of the owners of this property. Well, when he died, he had a will. He went and had a will created, and he did not mention this land in his will. And the family, when they probated his will, they didn't really understand what he owned. They didn't understand that he owned this interest in land because he didn't mention it in his will. He mentioned other things like his house and other properties that he owned, his bank accounts, but he did not mention that family property that he had an interest in. And I had a conversation with another client a few weeks ago, and this time it was in the context of estate planning. We were going through her estate plan and coming up with a list of all of her assets and helping her to put together a plan for what would happen to her property after she dies. And I tell you, I had stood up to leave the room so that I can get to another meeting, and my office coordinator was going to come down to see them out. I was standing up on my way out the door before she mentioned that she owned a portion of land. And she said, well, I didn't think that counted because it's family land. It's not 100% mine, and it's just kind of, my older sibling, they're handling things, and I just figured that I didn't need to deal with that. And so I want to come on here and tell y'all that if you own anything like land, house, if you own 100%, if you own 10%, I want you to put that in your will, put that in your trust, include it in your estate plan because it's your asset for one. And so if it's an asset, it needs to be included regardless of if it's land or a house or business, bank accounts. All of that stuff needs to be part of your estate plan. But also it helps us. If you own heirs property, you may own 10%, you may own 0.25% of the land. Regardless of what you own, if you can leave your portion of that land to someone specific in your estate plan, we can account for that. So that means that when your executor goes to probate your will, or when your trustee is administering your trust, they'll say, so-and-so had 0.25% of land in such and such county, Georgia. And so I could actually figure out what's going on with this land and see how we can get this cleared up and maybe, actually use the property as an asset. So I would say if you're not going to do anything about it during your lifetime, at least list it in your will or your trust so we can keep track of it. And then maybe you can say, I only own 0.25%, but I'm going to make sure that my 0.25% goes to this particular child who actually has an interest in the land, rather than just letting it continue to be heirs property with there being no accounting for what happened to what portion of the land. And I'll say this is something that I believe causes families to lose their land. I actually had a situation where we did some title research and we found a deed where someone who was a neighbor of one of my clients was selling their portion of land. And the way they described the land was, the way we do it with deeds, you may be familiar if you've seen land deeds. It'll say 100 acres, more or less than a step, 25 acres that I gave to my cousin, 5 acres that I sold to my neighbor, and 2 acres that the Department of Transportation got by eminent domain. It's typically kind of written like that. And so you'll see this big piece of land and you'll say, okay, so they own that big piece of land, but it's like, less than itself. So there are little portions of the land that are taken out of that description and should not be included in the transfer of that land. Well, in this particular situation, there was a 25-acre or so piece of land that this particular landowner accepted from his larger description of the property. So that means that 25 acres was not supposed to be sold when he transferred his property to the next person. But that was not really kept track of, because it's just like, okay, so you got this big piece of land and this little bitty piece out of this land is not mine. Well, over the years, the people who bought the land from this person and then sold it to the next person and then they sold it to the next person, the person down the line didn't realize they didn't own the whole piece of land. They thought they owned everything, but they own everything except that small piece of land. And so the land, I believe, kind of got sucked in with the larger land. Whether that was intentional or unintentional, that's beyond the scope of this video. But what I will say is that we have to keep track of our land, even if it's just a small portion. Anything that we can see in the land records that helps us to see who owns this land, who this land is passing from one person to the next. If we can keep track of that, that will make it more likely that this land could be preserved into the future. So to sum it all up, what I'm saying is, if you own any portion of land, whether you have your full 100% rights to that land or you own a fractional interest that you share with your family members, whether or not your name is on a deed or not, if you know that you own an interest in this land, make sure that you include it in your estate plan. Put it in your will, put it in your trust, and allow the people who are coming after you to use those documents to help preserve this land in the family, clear the title to the land, sell it, whatever it is that the family wants to do. But when people are saying, well, it's just family land, I don't have to put it in my will, that's just making things worse for future generations. So that's my little tidbit for you today. Make sure that you are not in the number of landowners who are not including their interest in land in their estate plans. Y'all take care and have a wonderful day.